Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Breaking Point Podcast UK. Today, we're here with Victoria Mortimer, or the Unlikely Accountant, and we're going to have a bit of a different one for me, I guess, because it's probably not going to be very mental health based. It's going to be more, I don't know, navigating life and stuff, and sort of for young people. That's sort of what I'm hoping to get out of this, sort of finances and stuff. I'm hoping we can get some good information out of Victoria. So, hey Victoria, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
How did you get into accountancy?
Yeah, good question. So I think like a lot of people, when they sort of leave uni, they end up just falling into things. It was maybe a bit more deliberate than that. So I really wanted to work for a big company. I felt like I wanted to be on a grad scheme and have sort of very set career progression. I actually really wanted to work in New York. And I always had this idea that that's where I wanted to work at some point in the future. So in my mind, I thought, if I join a global organization that has an office there, maybe that's, one way of making it to New York. And when I was at uni, I was president of the Business Society, and Deloitte were our main sponsor. So I got to know a lot of the guys there quite well. And they all seemed very nice, and Deloitte was a global organisation. So I thought, maybe I'll apply to work there then. So applied to work in corporate finance because I'd done some sort of corporate strategy modules as part of my degree. And yeah, one of the things when you work there is that they make you become an accountant. So I didn't necessarily set out to be an accountant, but by virtue of working there, I had to become a qualified accountant, which, I mean, on the one hand, it is great. I remember someone, when they were trying to sell the role to me, that if you're a chartered accountant, you've got job security for life, which I quite like the sound of that. And, it's a globally recognised thing. And it is, it's great on your CV. It kind of gets you an interview at most places because people recognise that it's hard to get and it's a great qualification. But it was kind of thrust upon me. And if I'd have had the choice to opt out of it, I probably would have done at the time because I didn't really want to be an accountant per se. And sort of hence the name of my podcast.
Yeah. Is it right that you wanted to work in fashion in New York?
That was it. I wanted to work in fashion in New York. That's what I wanted to do. And instead, I just ended up as an accountant working in Manchester at the time. So I did what a lot of people do, and I did my 4 years, which is how long it takes you to qualify as a chartered accountant. And then I got straight out of there. I think I was a typical millennial that felt like I wanted to have my cake and eat it. And the work-life balance in corporate finance wasn't very good, shall we say. The hours are very long and unpredictable, and I just couldn't hack it. I like sleep too much. And we can come back to maybe mental health and those kind of topics later, because I am big on that side of stuff as well. And for me, a good night's sleep is everything, and you couldn't get that working in that kind of role. So I left there, and then I went to work for KFC at the head office. So I was in the commercial finance team there. Believe it or not, I'd never eaten a KFC until I worked there, and then I think I ate enough KFC in those 2.5 years to basically last me a lifetime. So yeah, that was a fun job, and worked on lots of interesting things, and got exposure to a lot of stuff, and exposure to a lot of fried chicken as well. And then I left there, and then I went to Charles Tyrwhitt, who you might know as they do the men's shirts, so men's formal wear. So they were similar to TM Lewin, if you've heard of them. I mean, TM Lewin,
don't do TM
anymore, but Charles Tyrwhitt definitely do. So I worked there for about 6 years, and then COVID happened, and then that was just a bit of a weird time for everybody. I got furloughed, which was great actually, because I was getting paid. I was still getting paid to not work, which was great. I've never been in that position before. So I had time to start my podcast and read a lot and just explore lots of other interests. And I think it made me realise that when you're not in an office environment, which obviously I was, we all got sent to work from home. I think when you're left with just the work at home, it certainly highlighted to me that maybe it wasn't the most fulfilling thing in the world. playing around with spreadsheets all day. I'm not trying to do myself a disservice with what I was doing, but it just didn't feel that rewarding, and I just felt like I wanted to do something different. So then I went to the sort of other end of the spectrum and went to a small company called Pottage, which is essentially a startup. So a frozen food business that delivered frozen ready meals direct to your front door. So like the HelloFresh kind of idea, sort of delivered foods. And it was a much smaller business, but it was a great opportunity to just be way more hands-on with like the running of a business and actually feel what it's like to almost be an entrepreneur without the risk of it being your money. Although I was the finance director, so it was still my responsibility. But what is it like to run a business, and getting used to making decisions and making lots of decisions. Every day there was a different problem that you had to solve, and it was actually a really good lesson in how resourceful you are, and a real test of your sort of practical capabilities, which I enjoyed. And it was just different challenges rather than the mental challenges of fanning around in spreadsheets. It was very like hands-on practical stuff, which was a change which I quite enjoyed. Then now another startup that makes chocolate but without cocoa. So it's called Win Food Lab.
You mentioned something about working from home. There's a lot of talk nowadays about, because so many people work remotely, don't they? What's your opinion on working remotely? And do you think it's a net good or a net bad?
If I'm honest, I think it's net bad. For a whole host of reasons. I think, and maybe I'm speaking personally, but just having from conversations I've had with other people that do work at home, I think what I hear is that people don't strike the balance. So you get the one camp of people that say, "Oh, when I work from home, I literally don't stop. I get to my desk first thing, and I I barely take a break because you're not going to like the water cooler or whatever. You're just at home. So there's natural breaks you get in the day when you're in an office you don't have. So you just chain to your desk all day." On the other side of the spectrum, I know people that will go to the cinema in the middle of the day because they can get away with it because they're not that busy. And it's those sorts of people that I think maybe ruin it for the genuine people. But I think putting that aside, work ethic and how many hours you throw at something, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant unless you're getting the job done. But I think, missing out on that social interaction with people, missing out on that opportunity to build relationships, missing out on those opportunities to, just form better working relationships with your colleagues. You just don't get that from home. And personally speaking, I used to live on my own. So if I didn't go to work and I was working from home, I might not see another human being for a couple of days, and it might not even be on Zoom either if it just works out that way. And humans need connections, and it's important. And also, for learning and development, you pick up so much on people's tone, and everyone's different as well. How you might speak to one colleague is not how you would speak to somebody else, and I think you pick up on those kind of things more quickly when you're in the office, and you miss out on overhearing things. I learned a lot just from sitting in front of the finance director and just when I was at Charles Tyrwhitt, and just hearing the way that he dealt with things, or the way he spoke to other people, or that kind of thing. And I honestly cannot imagine a world where my grad job, for example, at Deloitte, starting that and working remotely, I just think it would have been impossible. And I think coming back to the point as well about, well, it doesn't matter how many hours you work as long as you're getting the work done. I think we've now maybe lost a sense of what's achievable in a day, because I do think a lot of people are at home not working that hard, and that's not true for everybody, but I just have observed plenty of people that work at home, and obviously it's relaxed. But for me, it's the social just element, and the picking up on how you learn and whatnot. And it kind of makes me sad now when I walk around London, and one of the reasons I always loved London is because of the hustle and bustle and the atmosphere and the busyness of it. And it doesn't quite feel the same sometimes. So I'm definitely sort of pro and would advocate going into an office.
I agree. And especially for, as you stated, people sort of in their early 20s and stuff, they definitely should be in an office or in some form of work environment. I think maybe as you get older, maybe 50s plus, it would probably be perfectly all right, and you have that sort of residual like social contact with your family, or maybe you've had enough of people at that point in your life to some degree, and therefore you're far more willing and are capable of working from home the majority of the time. I know, I mean, my dad works from home, and he's worked from home for ages. He runs his own company, and it can be isolating. And if you're obviously an extroverted person, then it's going to be really difficult, and they'll probably avoid it. But particularly for young people, I know some young people in their 20s that have been working from home, and I just think it can't be good overall. Your sort of lack of, as you said, interaction, and also so it's a weird one. I don't really know where that goes going forward, to be fair.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people as well, it's nice for you to just feel like you've got agency over your own time. So if you've got an employer and you don't own your own business, so you're always working for somebody that's kind of calling the shots. If you at least have the autonomy and the flexibility to choose where you work, I see why that's a benefit, because you can just feel like you're you've got a bit more control. So and I get for people that like have children and things like that, where they've got nursery drop-offs and pickups and things like that. If you've got to get to an office that's miles away, that's really inconvenient. So having agency of your own time is really it's a nice perk to have. So I get that, but I think just the missing out on the interaction with other humans, I genuinely think that's that's a shame. Yeah, and especially for the younger generation that maybe aren't as well practiced at it. It is a skill to deal with people. At the end of the day, that's what working's all about. People work with people. It doesn't really matter what your job or your industry is. And if you don't practice those social skills, then you're not going to get very good at them.
Exactly. And more than ever, young people need that, because they're more sort of isolated than ever. And not, unfortunately. Let's talk about the podcast. When did you start that, and why did you start?
Yeah, so I mentioned I got furloughed, and to be honest, I just thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with all this time that I'm now going to have? Because at least work was providing a bit of a distraction, during the day. And I just thought it would be something fun. I'd started listening to quite a lot of podcasts in lockdown, which I think a lot of people did, and I wanted to just try my hand at something different. I'd always kind of told myself I wasn't a creative person because I'm an accountant, and you can't be a creative person if you're a numbers person. That's just not how it is. And I just thought, I'll just give it a go, and it can just be a hobby, and maybe no one will listen to it except my mum. But at least it will keep me occupied. So I'm not doing anything else. So I went on Google and just put, how do you start a podcast? And found out it's actually very easy to start a podcast. There's lots of different softwares out there. There was something called Canva that you can use to do the sort of the creative side of things. And
big up Canva.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah, and it's like it's
great,
cheap or whatever. And so that was kind of just why in general starting a podcast. And then I thought, okay, well, what am I then going to talk about? And I, given what I do, just sort of working in finance and this, that, and the other, and also I'd also become a mental health first aider when I worked at Charles Tyrwhitt. And for me, money worries are, they're an enormous cause of mental health problems. I know people that have suffered because they, gotten themselves into debt, for example, because they've overspent, and, money's just at the heart of everything. And yet it's still quite a taboo topic quite a lot of the time. I remember thinking when I worked in KFC, which I mentioned, I didn't know how much my manager earned, because why would I? I would never ask her, and I just didn't know. But then I thought on reflection, well, isn't that weird? Because how do I know if I want her job or not if I don't know what the salary is? And then, other things in the workplace where you find out that somebody that does the same role as you gets paid more than you, and you think, oh, okay, well, why is that? And maybe I didn't push hard enough on salary negotiations. And it's partly because there's just a taboo around money and it is very emotional. So my idea for the podcast was kind of, let's try and just talk about those different topics and try and, make them a bit less taboo. And also just, try and encourage people to take an interest, because one, as well as being told that I'm not like a normal accountant, people will then also, they'd either say that or they'd then say, oh, I couldn't do your job because I'm not a numbers person. And people are quite happy to say, oh, I'm not a numbers person because they didn't like maths at school. And actually, you can't really avoid numbers as a grown-up, because presumably you're going to get a job and you're going to get paid and you might have a credit card and you might want to invest or you might want to get a mortgage or do all these things, and they're all numbers-based and they're not that scary. But if you fear them, then maybe you won't go ahead with it. And just personal experiences as well, and those of my friends just made me think, okay, well, there's definitely something in this, in the topic. So that's why I thought I'll just start a podcast trying to talk about those things. So like, how do you get a house? What do you need to do to be a first-time buyer? How can I get myself out of debt? What are some sort of tips and tricks from someone who's done that? Starting a business, what kind of things you need to consider?
And we'll get onto all that in a bit.
Of the podcast, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. I've listened to a few of the episodes, sort of skimmed through them. You should, yeah, definitely, yeah. You should carry on doing it. Like you've got. I mean, I don't want to say you've got real potential, because who am I? But as in, there are so many. I think there's a huge demographic that would respond well to you. There's loads and loads of young women, men, whatever, people that would, relate to you, and they're probably in similar positions to you are. They've worked in like corporate situations, and they're, out of uni and they're struggling with what to do, etc., etc. And I would listen to a podcast with you host, definitely. So yeah, if you want to carry on doing it, then you're welcome. Yeah. So definitely, like, do it. If you want to pick it up at some point, I would recommend it, because I think there's definitely a demographic and a niche there, and you've got you're likable enough to keep it going. So that's what I'm.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because when you talk about financy things, it can sometimes be a bit like boring and depressing and daunting, and it really doesn't have to be. You can still inject a bit of fun, into it, and
absolutely,
it can't be a bit shit at the start. You're struggling, but yeah. Thanks. I did think maybe this year I would do some more episodes, not least just because I'm quite nosy, and I really enjoy just talking to people, and everybody's got a story, and I like listening to people's perspectives on things, and
you should, and
bring it back,
and a great background as well. That's great. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Could be my bedroom / studio.
Yes, it's gorgeous. Okay, so what have I got in my questions? I normally put them up on my screen, but I didn't, because I thought maybe you weren't around. I sent them to you, didn't I? When you said someone was doing the same job as you, what? I hate to ask, but I'm going to ask. Was it a man that was doing the same job as you and earning more?
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. And you know what? It was so interesting, because at this, I kind of then had a beam up on it about it a little bit. But I remember the time, or maybe it was around that time prior to that, I can't remember exactly. But I just remember I was recruiting, and I, interviewed various people. And I remember asking a guy, what are your salary expectations? And he just looked me in the eye and was just like, I earn X and I'd be looking for Y, and added sort of like 15K to the number. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then and he'd not given a very good interview either. It was just wasn't great. His answers were a bit wishy-washy. He wasn't even a qualified accountant at this point, so he didn't have his, qualifications to back anything up. And then I interviewed a female who interviewed way better, was just way more competent, great. I really liked her. I could tell that she'd be really, really great in the role and hardworking and whatnot. And then I asked her what her salary expectations were. And she was kind of she was moving into finance, and it was a breakaway from the industry or the area she had been in. So because of that, she was just like, oh, I haven't worked in finance before, so I'd moved for, the same money, and, didn't ask for a 15k pay rise like the other guy did. And, it's a bit of a facile example, but I just thought this is the difference between guys and girls. I've got this great girl who's clearly really competent, and no, she hasn't worked in finance, but she's got all this experience with all these transferable skills, and I can tell that she'll be able to do this job with her eyes closed, even though she hasn't got finance experience. And then I've got this guy who gave me all these wishy-washy answers that, yes, has started his qualifications, but he hasn't finished, and didn't give me very strong answers, and then just asked for 15k on top of what he was, earning. And that maybe he was trying it on, but just because he had the guts to ask for that, I couldn't help but think some sucker's probably going to give that to him just because he had the balls to ask, whereas, she didn't. So I offered her the job, and I gave her more money, because I was like, maybe you didn't ask me for it, but I think you're worth it, and I want you to come here feeling motivated. And years ago, that's probably the kind of thing I would have done. I would have been like, oh, I don't have the experience, this, that, and the other. And you do read that, don't you? That guys will apply for a job even if they only meet like 50% of the criteria or something. Whereas, a female, if she's, there's a couple of things that if she doesn't think she can do, she won't apply at all. And it just really annoyed me, because I just thought, that's what perpetuates gender pay gaps and things like that. And even in interviews, he was honest. He told me what he earned, but that's not a question that if I'm asked that in an interview, I just don't offer up that information, because I kind of think neither of us have got anything to gain from me telling you what I earn. Because if you've got a role on offer, you know what you want to pay, you know what the budget is. And if I tell you a certain figure, immediately you're then just going to judge me, because it's like, okay, well, if I tell you what I earn and this job is for the same salary, are you then going to be thinking, well, why would you move for a job that's not an increase? Or, how much of an increase is acceptable if I tell you I earn X and this job is, for, 50k more than that? Does that mean I'm then not up for the job? And I just think it's opens a can of worms, I think, and it perpetuates pay gaps, because women do themselves a disservice, and guys don't, in that regard. So yeah, that would be a tip from me, that if you're asked that, I just don't think it's anyone else's business, and you just you keep that card close to your chest. Because also bargaining and negotiating your salary on the way in, that's your chance. That's your chance, because once you work at that organisation, everyone knows this, it's way harder to get pay rises, because you work there then, and the leverage might not be the same. So yeah, that would be a tip. People can do with that.
That's really interesting. One of the biggest differences between men and women from a personality point of view is trait agreeableness. So there are 5 traits of personality. I won't go into them, but one of them is agreeableness, and women tend to be far more agreeable than men on average. And obviously what causes that is up for debate, but what you've just spoken about there is incredible example of the difference between some men and some women, because there are plenty of men that are more agreeable than plenty of women. But you strike me as a very agreeable person, and men, and doesn't not about men. Disagreeable people will just bargain for themselves, and they'll be out for themselves more than they'll be out for other people. So they'll come in and they'll go, yeah, I want this, this, and this, and if you don't give it to me, then I'll go. So a large reason why men sometimes earn more than women is because men simply demand more, and they don't give a fuck about going, or but I don't want to, I don't want to upset this person and stuff like that. I mean, I'm a very agreeable guy, so that I do think like that, but a lot of people don't. So that is, I think you've articulated a perfect example of what can happen and what happens all the time, and one reason as to why there may be, or there is, a pay gap. So I think you're spot on with everything you said, to be fair. What advice would you give to young people who are wondering about money and stuff, and where to go next? I keep freezing, for fuck's sake. Sorry for that.
I was sort of quite
It is carrying so much.
what advice would I give if they're struggling with money? So I think
Or what should they know about money?
for us, they should know about money. I think money is a great tool for being able to do lots of stuff, and being honest with yourself around what makes you feel good is a good indicator as to how you should spend your money. So I think we've grown up in a sort of an era of consumerism, and we've been marketed to and encouraged to just consume stuff. And at the expense of everything, at the expense of whether you can afford it or not. Credit cards can be very easy to come by. And let's be honest, if you're having to put something on a credit card, I might have used Klarna once or twice, but companies like that are just encouraging you to buy stuff that you quite clearly can't afford there and then because they've given you the option to pay an installment. That's a great idea for a mortgage because it's such a huge sum of money. But for a pair of trainers, like if you're having to use a buy now, pay later schemes, you probably can't afford it. Is one thing I would say.
Great idea, isn't it? Brilliant.
Yeah, it is. And I have used like a tip I would always use, if you're offered interest-free credit, I will always take it because cash is really important. You need cash for a rainy day. You never know what's around the corner. So having cash in the bank, and I try to aim for this, but having 3 months sort of salary just as cash in the bank is just a really comforting thing to have because it just means that in the event that something happens, life happens, who knows what's around the corner, just knowing that you've got like a bit of a nest egg in the bank, not that that's even a nest egg, but a rainy day fund so that it's a safety net. And I think that's peace of mind, and that's worth a lot. But one thing I've sort of trained myself to do over the last few years is just to genuinely want less. And I have been there, done that when you're sort of maybe a bit younger and naive. Like you want to buy stuff and buy like clothes and jewelry and the handbags and all those kind of things. And they can make you feel good for a short period of time. But then I have this big obsession with like cost per wear. So anything that I buy sort of clothes wise, I want to wear everything a lot. I really want to get sort of my money's worth. It really pains me if I have something hanging in my wardrobe that costs quite a lot of money and I've worn it once. Like that doesn't satisfy me. And it's wasteful. It's really wasteful. And it's actually surprising like how little you actually do really need. And I think as I've maybe moved around a little bit, you can't be bothered to like schlep loads of stuff from one place to the next. So every time you move, you kind of have like a bit clear out. And so, I've naturally just ended up with fewer things, I guess, because I just can't be bothered to cart them from one place to the next. And it's nice. It's nice not having lots of, stuff and, too much clutter around. And if you just genuinely want less, then exactly. If you want less than that, just that desire to just kind of consume for the sake of it, to try and like keep up with like influencers or whatever, it just kind of goes away. And it's a great powerful thing because I, in doing that, just feel very much in control of what I buy, and I don't feel like I, yearn to things in a way that maybe I did a while ago. Because that's when you start to beat yourself up. That's when kind of like the negative self-talk comes in, and then that's when you can sometimes be a bit unkind for yourself. Because let's be honest, if you're in debt, for example, it's because you've consumed more than you can, afford, and probably consume more than you actually need. So I just kind of think having that sort of scarcity mindset, it's free, and it just means that when you do, spend, you're doing it really mindfully and with purpose, and then you just really appreciate what you have. And I think just also being very in control of what comes into your bank account and what goes out. That's another really powerful thing to just be aware of. And it's, again, bringing that mindfulness aspect into it. But when I did this exercise, I had to save like a quite a large amount of money in a short space of time. So I literally set up a spreadsheet with, okay, what comes in? And that's quite straightforward because it's just my monthly salary. And then let's keep a diary of everything that goes out. And when you rack it all up like that, you're like, oh my God, I spend 200 quid just on Ubers or, however much it is, KFC or whatever it might be. And there's nothing inherently sort of wrong with that. But in the cold light of day, when you see it written down and sort of tallied up like that, it's like, oh, okay, well, do you know what? Maybe that's not great. And maybe I could just get public transport and just think about my route in advance and save 200 quid or, whatever it might be. And again, for me, that was just a very empowering thing to do because it just meant that I'm not being wasteful. I'm in control. I'm not. And I think a lot of people can sometimes feel like their finances are out of control, especially with contactless and Apple Pay and one click and all that kind of stuff. It's so easy. It is so easy to spend money. You almost have to fight against it. So doing that exercise, it just makes you feel a bit more in control. And that doesn't mean that I still don't go out and spend everything I earn each month, but at least at least you know where it's gone. And I think just having those kind of like basic things from the get-go just can breed quite good habits that then just, as you then start to earn more money as you go through your career and whatnot, it's just a useful thing. Because then one thing that I've seen as I've, gotten older, and maybe you found this as well, but you chat to people who they don't like their jobs and that, they hate work and they're really not enjoying it, but they can't quit because they've got a lifestyle that's predicated on the fact that they earn that much money, or they've got outgoings that mean that, they've got a mortgage that is predicated on that salary, and so then they can't ever leave. And referencing back to when I was saying people like to have autonomy over their own time and things like that. If you're in a job that you just feel like you can't leave because you've got all these outgoings and whatnot, that's a horrible place to be. Like, that is how awful to feel so trapped in something that you don't feel like you can ever, take a step back from. Whereas if you've been, quite circumspect with your finances and maybe not, got a massive mortgage just because you can afford it, or you've lived a bit more frugally, you've got this rainy day fund or whatever, you've then got a choice that you can think, well, I could quit my job, or I could do something along those lines, because I've got some money in the bank, and that gives you some freedom and some choice. So yeah, I think that they would be like some sort of just top tips from me, to a way to kind of just make yourself feel in control, and that that you're your fate's kind of a bit more in your hands, rather than just feeling like you're trapped, or that you're spending and ways with money are out of control. They're things that just give me like comfort anyway.
Yeah, no, those are all brilliant tips. There's a saying, I think the happiest person is someone that can fit all their belongings in one suitcase, or something like that. It's basically promoting minimalism. And I mean, that's obviously a bit of an extreme example, but I'm incredibly minimalistic. Like, this room's basically got nothing, and my bedroom has basically got nothing in it either. And I think clutter, that's because by temperament, I'm a very orderly person. But I also, and I'm a huge believer in sort of going to mental health. Your external world is a action of your internal world, and therefore anyone that feels as if their internal world is chaos and they don't know what to do, I would always recommend, well, go and find something that you can tidy or that you can sort out, and that's a good sort of first to it's all about alleviating chaos. I think if you're a chaotic person, then you want to eradicate as much chaos as possible, and I think that's just a great thing to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Everything's quite minimalist here. It's just good for your mental. I don't know. It's just nice to think that things are orderly, and it's one less thing to think about. You don't have to tidy up because everything's just kind of got its place.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's a place for chaos, and I think if you're bounded by everything being spotless and perfect, then that can become a problem in itself, to be fair.
And we're not in the army. We're like not barracks that we've got to keep like pristine.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I like the bit about clothes. I saw a thing on Facebook. I think it was Facebook, probably, because it wouldn't be on Instagram, a while ago, about this woman who had done an experiment. She had 30 pieces of clothing, and she think she just recycled 30 pieces of clothing, sort of using different combinations, and like no one. I think she did it for 30 days or maybe longer. Granted, 30 days isn't very long, but you know, the combinations of different things, there are sort of inordinate amounts. So you can get a lot done with, especially sort of women's clothing, because there's more accessories and stuff, I think.
Yeah.
And you can.
Well, definitely, you should definitely get to your wardrobe and have, really considered pieces. Lessons for sure. And you know, the fast fashion companies, I mean, I guess they serve a purpose for, you know, people on lower incomes or whatever, but I think they're just horrible, really, because they kind of bred this kind of easy come, easy go mentality. Like, oh, I'll just get a top, it's like £5, whatever. Doesn't matter if I wear it or throw it away. But then it ends up, you know, it all ends up in landfill, and it's just, they think they're a bit putrid.
Yes, no, I completely agree. They are, and obviously you're interested in fashion, aren't you? So yeah, it's all about quality over quantity, isn't it? You spoke about how people can be sort of restricted and bounded by their jobs, and how there's a huge. I've had a couple of, well, one in particular, couple actually of people like that are entrepreneurs, and they've spoken about how there's this, you know, the corporate and the entrepreneur world, that sort of, I suppose, the similarities and the differences, and how there's a huge anti-culture of, you know, turn up to work, do as little as possible, and then leave. And I suppose that sort of leads into that guy that was interviewed, and he was basically saying, in the sense of, in a weird way, because I'm giving you service, I want as much money out of it as I possibly can get. And what's your, I don't really know where I'm going with this, actually. I've gone down I've gone down an alley. Talk of the Matrix. What's your opinion on something like the Matrix? That sort of, have you heard that Matrix? You've heard the term the Matrix? Just because you were sort of, the words you were using. Yeah, but there's also popularized by Andrew Tate, who, you know, we don't talk about, we don't like, but he coined the term the Matrix, in the sense of sort of the, you know, the corporate rat race and stuff like that. And I think, I mean, based on what you've said, you've almost had your own experience with that, in the sense that you decided to work for a startup company, because that's far more entrepreneurial. I mean, in a sense, you're partaking in entrepreneurship now more than you're partaking in corporate shit. Don't know if that's a word. But how has that lifestyle change? How has that change in sort of company affected your opinion on, I don't know, corporate sort of drive and climbing the ladder and all that sort of, that world?
If I think back to, like, you know, when I joined the world of work, and I started at Deloitte, and I felt like I wanted a career, I wanted a solid career path, and you know, I wanted to earn lots of money. I suppose that was my motivation, like it is for a lot of you know, for most people. We all want to earn money and get paid more so we can buy more stuff, just talking about earlier. And you know, corporate careers can be a great way to achieve that. I feel like I have this real just aversion. This might sound a bit obvious, because I'm sure lots of people do, but I just have this real aversion to stress. Like, I just think stress is a hidden killer. It takes its toll in really, like, you know, nefarious, pernicious, like, ways. And sometimes it's in the pursuit of these kind of like corporate jobs to try and be paid more money. And if you don't find it stressful and you want to go up that ladder and be more senior, you know, I think that's great. But I think you need to be able to sort of just strike a balance between what makes you happy and what you do for a living. So, you know, I love it when I meet people who really enjoy their job. You know, I actually hate that phrase that says, "Don't do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life." I don't think it's quite like that. Work is still work, and it comes with pressures. But there's a difference between being like tested and pressure versus being stressed and feeling like it's, it's overwhelming. And I think if you have a job that pays well and it strikes that balance between, being challenging enough, but in a way that you don't feel stressed by it, then I think you've hit the jackpot really, because it's, you found that balance. And for me, I have a big, one of my sort of core values is balance, which is why I think I ducked out of Deloitte so early, because I was, having to work these longer hours, didn't feel like I had agency over my own time. But I remember I was going on holiday and I'd been so busy that I'd booked the day off before I was flying, because I hadn't had time to just, do all the stuff you want to do before you go on holiday, like get your nails done and pack and, all that kind of stuff, and make sure I've got my toiletries or whatever. Yeah. And then when the partner found out that I wasn't actually flying that day, he made me come into the office. And I'm like, so this is my annual leave. And I felt like I couldn't say no. And, working sort of long, unpredictable hours, I'm a bit of a creature of habit at times. And I take a lot of comfort from my routines. And one of them is, my sleep patterns, going to the gym, what I eat and things like that. And I found that I was sacrificing all those things for this job, because there was no time to go to the gym, because you're in the office for crack of dawn and you were there till gone midnight. And then I can never eat another Wagamama in my life, because there was one underneath the office at Deloitte, and that's just where we always used to go when we're in the office late. The money was okay for me. It just wasn't enough to offset the fact that I was just having to sort of sacrifice these other things. And so when I listen to some of my friends talk, that I don't know what they earn, but it's probably double at least what I earn, but then I hear sort of how stressed they are and things like that, I'm just like, if good for you, like if that's how you want to sort of continue to live. But I'd rather sort of sacrifice some of my earning potential to trade off for the ability to manage my own time a bit more, and to not mess up with my routine of choosing when I go to the gym, what time I go to bed and things like that. Because for me, they're things that just bring me a lot of joy and happiness, and they're good for my mental health. And I know that's buzzword and whatever at the moment, but the power of a good night's sleep is everything. Drinking plenty of water, having a good diet,
valuable. And
when you start to sacrifice those things, and relationships as well. I remember I was single when I was at Deloitte, and I was trying to date, and there's this guy who'd been like asking me out, and I kept cancelling on him, and then finally we agreed this day, and I was like, yeah, I can definitely make it because the project's finished. I just need the partner to sign something, and then I'll come. And the partner went into his office on the phone and just didn't come out for an hour. And in the meantime, I've sent this guy to the pub to go and wait for me. And he's like, you're a joke, I can't believe this. And I'm like, it's not my fault. It's like kind of out of my hands. It's my job. And, maybe he's been a bit difficult, but I just felt like this is literally impacting on on the rest of my life. And it's not worth it, in my opinion. So, exactly. I think people just, should just, pursue what makes you happy. Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's what you've just spoken about is another incredible case study of a lot of the confusion I think that goes on in like society, because the talk of like male privilege and patriarchy, and what you've basically just described there is how it's not. I think women actually have it more sus. There's a small minority of men that will go at their career 99. They will devote 99.5% of their 95% of their life to their career, and they'll sacrifice everything for it, and they'll be incredibly successful. But then, and you obviously have that. You could have done that if you wanted to, but then there's most people think, actually, this isn't worth it. I'm missing out on a relationship. I'm missing out on, extracurricular activities, social life. And I actually, and also when it comes to sort of, I suppose, relationships and heterosexual relationships, a lot of these women that earn a lot of money, they have husbands or that earn more money than they do, because that's what tends to happen. Women tend to pick men that earn more money than them. And I think that what you've just sort of pointed out there is an incredible example of how you made the decision of, you were obviously incredibly competent and you could easily have gone at this all you wanted, but actually, as you said, the money wasn't incredible, and what you were giving up for a bit more money just wasn't worth it. And I think that you definitely, as you said, balance is key, and it's key to mental health, and it's key to all aspects. So I think that's a really good thing. And also, too much wagamamas, I ain't about that life. I think that would, to be really annoying. I don't really like.
Yeah.
Oh no, Nando's. That must have been, because Nando's used to be so big, didn't it? It sort of died a bit of a death, Nando's. Yeah, exactly. So you said, right, I say that a lot, that's a bit of my phrase, you've spoken. You said earlier about how you trained to be a mental health first aider? That's brilliant. So first aider, tell me about that. Where did that come about?
Yeah, it's random, isn't it? So part of the reason I wanted to do is out of curiosity, because obviously you've heard of a physical first aider, or just a first aider, as it would be. And at Charles Tyrwhitt, they gave us the option to train for a handful of us who have put ourselves forward to be a mental health first aider. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. What does that entail? And effectively, it's just somebody who, the same way if you hurt yourself, you might get the first aider to help you put on a bandage or whatever. If you think you're struggling with your mental health, to have somebody who's a point of contact within the organisation that you just go and speak to, and just sort of say, oh, this has happened. I guess lots of us would do that maybe with our family or our friends if we felt like something was wrong, but maybe some people don't feel comfortable talking to those people, or they don't, they might not have lots of family and friends. And we did training, and ultimately the training just teaches you that you just sit there and listen. You don't give advice, which I think is human nature. And the training was good because it did sort of, I think when you're like a problem solver, it's natural and it is human nature that if someone presents a problem to you, immediately you want to try and help them come up solutions. And when you're, a manager at work or whatever, that's kind of what you're there to do. But as a mental health first aider, that's not what you're there to do. Not least because, and I always think this in general, that you're not qualified to give advice. What if you gave someone advice and they took it? Might turn out awfully. And a lot of people often they just want someone to listen, basically, and sort of empathize with what they're going through. And I'm quite an empathetic person, I think, which is one of the reasons that they sort of slipped to do it. And I'm just a big believer that problem shared and all that kind of thing, just get stuff off your chest. And I think as humans, we've all probably done this, where the moment you say something out loud to someone, you might be asking for help. I've done this at work, and I'm like, oh, I've just got a problem with this. And just by the virtue of saying it out loud, you somehow kind of then figure it out on your own, because you've just said it out loud and paused and thought about it. So sometimes just, offloading to somebody about what's wrong. And I also found that people seem to tell me stuff, even though I don't ask. Like I can be sat next to someone on a bus. I mean, I did it on a flight home once from holiday, and within 45 minutes, this guy it was like I was his therapist. I didn't ask him any questions. I think he obviously just felt like he needed someone to speak to, and I was a captive audience for 12 hours or however long we were on the flight for. People seem to be to tell me things. I'm a real advocate for it, because I don't think people should suffer alone, and there's help out there. That was another thing that they did tell you in the training, that you can't give advice, but if you you can encourage somebody to seek medical assistance or the help of a professional if you think that's appropriate to do so. And sometimes people
that not giving advice thing is interesting, because my dad's a Samaritan and they can't give advice, and but it's actually even up the chain, the sort of the hierarchy of mental health professionals. You'd be surprised how they don't encourage, even like clinical psychologists, to give advice, because I think the only people that can give, I mean, psychiatrists can obviously give medical advice because they're doctors, but clinical psychologists, yeah, they prescribe things, yeah. But clinical psychologists aren't really supposed to give as much advice as you think, because the point of a therapist is to allow their clients to work out and reformulate their ideas themselves, so they can facilitate that. But also, it's the same sort of premise as if you give someone a fish, they'll be full for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, they'll be good for however long. So
Yeah.
the not giving advice is more sort of ubiquitous than you'd think. And also another thing that I thought was interesting was when you said how when you were thinking, you had to say it out loud. Thinking is actually a really, what would you say, limited sort of form of working things out. Most people can't think very well because we think by speaking, and writing. We think by speaking and writing, so we have to articulate, learn the process of thought through different forms of articulation. So, because everyone said that they say it out loud, or they said it to someone, and then they're like, that's actually completely different to what I thought it was. So I always recommend people to write.
Yeah, being alone with your own thoughts is like a really that's a nice thing to have, that the luxury of of that. I say this because I live on my own, so I spend a lot of time on my own, and I think a lot of people can go through life without ever living on their own and spending much time on their own. So if you're never alone with your thoughts, like, when do you get a chance to process stuff? But then, having said that, having too much time with your own thoughts can be quite dangerous, because a lot of us are actually quite horrible the way that we speak to ourselves, and we catastrophize. It's human nature to do that. And this is another reason why, kind of circling back to when we were talking about whether you should work from home or not, if you're just sat at home, thinking and stewing on things all day, that can be really damaging and harmful. Whereas if you're in an office and you could just turn to the person who was sat next to you and just be like, oh, and my mum noticed that, because she used to work in she was frontline social worker, basically, doing child protection in Blackpool, where I'm from. I'm sure you can imagine, that's a difficult job in a difficult area.
Yeah, definitely.
Exposed to really, unpleasant, unsavory things. And there was a period where she was at home because she was writing reports and things, and someone called her and was rude and horrible to her on the phone, and then she just hung up, and she was at home all by herself, and she was burst into tears, she was all by herself, and she was like, normally we would have been in the office, and I could have just hung up and turned to my colleague and been like, this bitch just said this to me. I remember it doesn't swear, she would have said that, but and the person would have made her feel better about it. You can't do that in the same way when you're at home all the time. So yeah, having a mental health first aider, or just having somebody that you can say things out loud to, and get things off your chest is quite cathartic, I think.
Yeah, and also just as you were talking, I just thought I'd bring this up because I find it so interesting. Whenever I discuss mental health with someone, I know we're nearly done an hour, so I'll let you go soon. But I just wanted to say this right at the end. That everyone talks about fight or flight. The stress response, fight or flight, fight, flight, freeze. There's another stress response called tend and befriend, and that's more associated as the female stress response because it involves tending to children, infants, and befriending people around you. So just as you were talking about your mum there, her reaction would have been to go and tell someone what had happened, and she couldn't do that, so she then therefore had to, I don't know, it's just a thought that came to me. She then had to express her emotion in a different way, so she started crying. But that's why I think women use their social structures as sort of coping and regulatory strategies far more than men do. And I think that's a lot of the problem with men's mental health at the moment, because no one really knows that that's a thing. But I think the tend and befriend is really interesting. Just how, I mean, anyone can tend and befriend. I'm quite a bit of a tend and befriender. I think it's it's all about what regulates you, isn't it? When you feel stressed.
Yes.
Fundamentally,
Yeah, I mean, everyone copes in completely different ways, and I think not to stereotype, but guys stereotypically tend to sort of like bottle things up and don't want to show sort of vulnerability or like weakness, and they keep things inside, and I think that's really sad. I know there's lots of campaigns at the moment to try and get guys in particular to talk, because it's bottling things up is quite dangerous.
Yeah, no, it's not good. Right, final question.
Yes.
It is called the Breaking Point podcast because I'm interested in people's breaking points, moments where they thought, I need to make a change here, I can't go on, I've been interpreting the world or whatever in this form, and I need to do it like this, or what have you had a breaking point?
Oh my God, loads.
That's a good answer.
So, I mean, I've had...
Pick one.
Okay. I mean, I've had... There's been 2 times. I know you said to pick one, but I'm greedy. So there's been twice since in my career, I've quit my job where I haven't had another one to go to. And I've done that twice. And I think this is why I harp on about people having like rainy day money and not feeling trapped and that kind of thing, because I've experienced what it's like to be in a job that not only you just desperately not like it, but that it's been that strong where I've felt like I actually can't continue to work here because it's that bad. And I guess I've done that twice, and they were both for, well, similar but different reasons. I just wasn't enjoying the role, but the reasons I wasn't enjoying the role, for kind of different reasons. And for me, that's quite a extreme thing to do because we've all got bills, and I've had a job since I was 12. I've never sort of not worked, so this is not a.
I can imagine you'd have to be pushed pretty close to the edge to make that decision.
Yeah, but I think in both of those instances, and they happened about 10 years apart. I think I just have a very good sense of kind of myself, and I don't fall at the first hurdle. I'm very determined. It took me 3 times to pass my driving test. I didn't pass all my accountancy exams first time. I had to drop my A-levels and start again. Like, these are all other ones I would have mentioned. But in doing that, I've kind of built up my resilience, I suppose. So if I'm finding something difficult and I feel like it's upsetting my balance, because that's really important to me, and I feel like nothing is worth being stressed, and if I felt like I'm sort of heading towards that, then I wouldn't be being true to myself if I didn't do something about it. I'm quite a proactive person. If I'm unhappy with something, then I will do my best to change it, either through my mindset or, well, that's what you do, isn't it? You either change your mindset about it or you have to physically change the situation. And so both of those times, I guess you could say I was, at a breaking point, and my decision was to kind of flee the situation, but I was able to do that because I had the courage of my convictions to do it. I knew that I'd tried everything to make those situations work. And I, crudely had some money in the bank because I'd been prudent, that I was like, I can quit, and I backed myself to get another job before I, use all my savings. Because, that's what they're there for. And I think that's why I just harp on so much about people, having a handle on their, their finances, and just so that if a situation like that comes up where you just feel like I physically can't work here anymore, you've got the option to, you can duck out of it. So I guess they're kind of 2 times where I've felt like I'm at didn't feel like breaking point at the time, I suppose, but it was strong enough for me to feel like I have to walk away from this, and I was very comfortable with that decision. I remember the first time I did it, and then I spoke to, I think, one of the partners I used to work for at Deloitte, and he was like, you haven't quit your job, have you? And I was like, well, yeah, I have. And he's like, but you don't have another one? And I was like, no. And I know he was just a bit taken aback that I'd done that. But there were no doubts in my mind at both of those points, that it was the right thing to do. And I think, that's another good thing that comes from just knowing what makes you happy and being able to have reliance on your gut instincts, that I just thought this is, there's not a doubt in my mind that this is the right thing to do. And then good usually comes from it.
Completely, yeah. And I wouldn't even classify that as fleeing. I'd say that was an astute decision that you made after considering all the consequences. So what would have been worse would have been to almost stay in that position, in the sense of staying in a relationship. That's bad news. Maybe not so, actually, because that thing about relationships is very rarely they're all bad. But that job was clearly far more heavy on the con side than the pro side, so I wouldn't say that as a bad thing. I think you made the right decision there. So done, and now you're selling chocolate without any cocoa in it. So